Ethan Carter never imagined that his time on the Interstellar Research Station would change his life forever. As a xenobiologist, he had always been fascinated by alien species, their cultures, and the way they lived. But nothing could have prepared him for Jayara. Jayara was not human. She belonged to the Valari, a mysterious and beautiful alien species known for their hypnotic voices and deep emotional connections. With shimmering violet skin and glowing silver eyes, she moved with a grace that almost seemed unnatural. But what fascinated Ethan the most was her curiosity. Unlike many Valari, who preferred to keep their distance from humans, Jayara wanted to know everything about them. For months, she and Ethan had spent time together, talking about their worlds, their histories, and the strange differences between their species. He had thought of her as a friend, a colleague who was as fascinated by him as he was by her. But today, everything changed. Jayara stood in front of him, her silver eyes glowing with an emotion he couldn't quite understand. "I have made my choice, Ethan Carter," she said softly, her voice like a song. "I have chosen you as my mate." Ethan froze. For a moment, he thought he had misheard her. He blinked, searching her face for any sign that she was joking, but the Valari did not joke about things like this. His heart pounded. "Wait, what?" he stammered. "Mate. As in, marriage." Jayara tilted her head, her silver hair shifting like liquid metal. "Not exactly. Among my people, choosing a mate is deeper than human marriage. It is a bond of mind and soul. It is eternal." Ethan swallowed hard. "And you chose me." She smiled, stepping closer. "Yes, I have studied your kind, spoken to you, and felt something I have never felt before. Humans are unlike any species in the galaxy. You are unpredictable, creative, and full of emotion. It fascinates me. And you, Ethan Carter, are more than just a human. You are unique. You see me not as an alien, but as a person. That is rare among my kind." Ethan felt his brain struggling to keep up. He had never expected this, never even considered that Jayara might feel something beyond friendship for him. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Jayara's smile softened. "You are surprised," she said. "That is understandable. But my choice has been made. And according to my people's traditions, if I choose a mate, I must take him home, to meet my family." Ethan's eyes widened. "Meet your family? Like your parents?" She nodded. "Yes, and not just them. My entire house. I am of noble blood, Ethan. My parents are high-ranking members of the Valari Council." Ethan nearly choked on air. It was one thing to be chosen by an alien woman. It was another thing to meet her powerful family on a distant world. "Jayara," he said carefully, "I'm honored. Really. But don't you think this is a little fast? Humans don't usually decide things like this so quickly." She laughed softly, and the sound sent a strange shiver down his spine. "Humans take time to understand their feelings. Valari know instantly, and once we choose, we never doubt." Ethan ran a hand through his short brown hair, trying to process everything. He liked Jayara. He really did. But this was something much bigger than he had ever imagined. "What if your family doesn't like me?" he asked finally. Her expression turned serious. "They will not understand at first. To them, humans are unusual. They see your kind as young, untested. But I will not let their doubts change my decision. If you come with me, you will not be alone. I will stand by your side." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had spent years dreaming about exploring new worlds, learning about alien cultures, and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Now, the chance was right in front of him. It wasn't just a scientific journey anymore. It was personal. Jayara reached out, her fingers hovering near his. "I will not force you, Ethan Carter, but if you accept, we will leave tomorrow. My ship is ready." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. There was no deception in her eyes, no hidden agenda, just truth. and adventure. A slow grin spread across his face. "All right, Shira. Let's do this. Let's go meet your family." Her smile widened, and for the first time, Ethan saw something new in her: relief. Tomorrow, he would leave the station. Tomorrow, he would step onto a world no human had ever set foot on. And tomorrow, he would face the greatest challenge of his life: meeting his alien girlfriend's parents. Ethan Carter stood on the boarding platform, staring at the massive silver starship in front of him. The Valara ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked almost alive, its sleek metallic surface shifting with strange energy patterns. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Shira stood beside him, her silver eyes glowing with excitement. "Are you ready, Ethan?" she asked, her voice as smooth as a song. Ethan swallowed hard. He had always dreamed of traveling to an alien world, but now that it was actually happening, he felt a strange nervousness in his chest. "Ready as I'll ever be," he muttered. Shira smiled and led him up the ramp. The moment he stepped inside, he felt the air change. It was warmer, filled with a faint, sweet scent that reminded him of flowers back on Earth. The walls pulsed softly, as if the ship was breathing. Ethan resisted the urge to touch them. As they moved through the corridor, they were greeted by two Valara attendants. They were tall, with the same shimmering violet skin as Shira, but their expressions were unreadable. They bowed slightly to her, but gave Ethan a curious glance. "This is Ethan Carter," Shira introduced. "My chosen mate." One of the attendants, a male with sharp features, raised an eyebrow. "A human." His voice was polite, but there was clear surprise in his tone. Shira's expression remained calm. "Yes, he is coming with me to Valara Prime." The two attendants exchanged a look but said nothing. Instead, they gestured for Ethan and Shira to follow. Ethan could already feel the weight of their silent judgment. As they walked, he leaned closer to Shira. "I'm guessing humans don't visit your homeworld often." She chuckled softly. "You are the first." Ethan nearly stopped in his tracks. "The first?" "As in, no human has ever been there before." Shira nodded. "Valara Prime is a world of tradition. My people have little interest in outsiders." Ethan exhaled. "Great. No pressure." Shira smiled at him, her amusement clear. "Do not worry, Ethan Carter. I will be with you." They entered the main chamber of the ship, where a few more Valara were gathered. Some were seated, discussing something in hushed tones, while others stood near the observation window, watching the stars. As soon as Ethan entered, conversation stopped. Eyes turned toward him, scanning him with silent curiosity. Ethan was used to being stared at during research missions, but this was different. These weren't scientists studying a new specimen. These were nobles judging whether he was worthy of standing among them. A tall Valara woman with intricate silver markings on her skin approached them. Her robes shimmered with gold and violet, a sign of high status. She studied Ethan for a long moment before speaking. "So, this is the human." Her tone was cool, not hostile, but not welcoming either. Shira nodded. "Yes, Ethan, this is Mirza, my mother's personal advisor." Mirza gave Ethan a slow nod. "You are braver than I expected, human. Few outsiders would dare to stand where you stand now." Ethan forced the small smile. "Well, I like a good challenge." Mirza didn't smile back. Instead, she looked at Shira. "Your father will not be pleased." Shira's expression didn't change. "That is for him to decide." Mirza's gaze lingered on Ethan for a moment longer before she turned and walked away. The tension in the room remained thick, but no one else spoke. Ethan leaned toward Shira again. "I'm really feeling the love here." Shira sighed. "They are not used to change. My family has followed the same traditions for generations. My father believes in the old ways." Ethan frowned. "And what happens if he doesn't approve of me?" Shira hesitated before answering. "Then we will have to convince him." Ethan wasn't sure how that was supposed to work, but before he could ask, the ship rumbled softly beneath his feet. A smooth voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in Valari. "We are departing. Estimated arrival at Valara Prime in 5 planetary cycles." Ethan took a deep breath as he felt the ship lift off. This was it. No turning back now. Jaira reached for his hand, her touch light but warm. "You are not alone, Ethan." He looked at her and felt some of his nerves settle. "I know." The stars outside the window stretched into long streams of light as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. Ethan had traveled through space before, but this time was different. This time, he wasn't just a scientist on a mission. He was a man stepping into an alien world where no human had ever been. And soon, he would meet the most powerful Valari in the galaxy. Ethan had traveled through space before, but nothing compared to what he was experiencing now. The journey to Valara Prime was smooth, almost too smooth. The Valari ship moved through space as if it was sliding on silk, with no turbulence or shaking. It felt unnatural compared to the rough, mechanical nature of human spacecraft. Jaira had stayed close to him during the entire trip, answering his endless questions about her world. He learned that Valara Prime was a world of great beauty, but also strict traditions. Her people valued strength, honor, and the preservation of their ways. Outsiders were rarely welcomed, and humans had never set foot on their soil before. As the ship approached the planet, Ethan pressed his hands against the observation window, his eyes widening in awe. Valara Prime was breathtaking. The planet's surface was covered in glowing blue forests, vast golden deserts, and shimmering silver oceans. Strange energy storms danced in the skies, creating patterns of light that looked like living art. Floating cities hovered above the surface, connected by massive bridges of pure energy. "Welcome to Valara Prime," Jaira said softly, standing beside him. Ethan exhaled. "I have to admit, it's beautiful." She smiled. "It is my home. And now, for a time, it will be yours as well." The ship slowly descended into one of the largest floating cities. The buildings were tall and curved, with glowing lines running through them, making the entire city look like a giant, breathing organism. The landing platform was surrounded by Valari guards, their long silver armor shimmering under the soft golden light of Valara's twin suns. As the ship touched down, Ethan's nerves returned. He was about to meet Jaira's parents, one of the most powerful families on this planet. Jaira placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Stay close to me." Ethan nodded, swallowing his anxiety. He had faced many challenges in his life, but this one felt different. The doors opened, and they stepped out onto the platform. A group of high-ranking Valari stood in a perfect line, their robes flowing gently in the wind. At the center was a tall, imposing figure with piercing golden eyes and long silver hair. His presence alone commanded respect. Ethan knew immediately this was Jaira's father. The Valari leader took a step forward, his eyes scanning Ethan with quiet intensity. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a deep, steady voice, he spoke. "So this is the human." Ethan could feel the weight of those words. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, one that carried both curiosity and judgment. Jaira stepped forward, her voice strong. "Father, this is Ethan Carter. He is my chosen mate." There was a sharp silence. Some of the Valari nobles exchanged glances, others frowned slightly. Ethan could tell that this was not the introduction they had been expecting. Jaira's father finally spoke again. "You bring a human before me, Jaira. Do you understand what you are asking?" Jaira lifted her chin. "I understand that I have chosen my own path. Ethan is strong, intelligent, and worthy." Her father's gaze did not shift from Ethan. "We shall see." Ethan knew this was a test. The Valari leader wasn't going to simply accept him. He had to prove himself. But how? Before he could think of a response, another figure stepped forward. She was tall and elegant, her violet skin marked with delicate silver patterns. Her long, flowing robes shimmered as she moved. There was no doubt. This was Jaira's mother. Her eyes were softer than her husband's, but her expression was unreadable. "Tell me, human," she said gently. "Why have you come here?" Ethan met her gaze, choosing his words carefully. "Because I care about Jaira. I respect her, and I respect your culture. I may not be Valari, but I want to understand your world." The Valari nobles whispered among themselves. Jaira's mother studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod, a thoughtful answer. Jaira's father, however, remained unmoved. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. He turned to one of the guards. "Take the human to the trial chambers. If he is to stand among us, let him prove his strength." Ethan blinked. Trial chambers. Jaira frowned. "Father, is this necessary?" Her father's expression was firm. "It is the way of our people. He will undergo the trial." Ethan didn't like the sound of that, but he wasn't about to back down. He glanced at Jaira, and she gave him a look of silent encouragement. "Fine," Ethan said, straightening his posture. "I'll take your trial." The Valari leader's golden eyes gleamed. "Then let us begin." Ethan followed the armored Valari guards through the grand halls of the floating city. The walls glowed faintly with silver-blue energy, and strange symbols moved across the surface like living text. The entire place felt ancient, yet advanced beyond anything humans had built. Jaira walked beside him, her expression tense. "The trial will not be easy, Ethan." He glanced at her. "What exactly do I have to do?" She hesitated before answering. "It changes depending on the one being tested. My father will decide the trial based on how he sees you." Ethan exhaled. "Great, so I don't even know what I'm preparing for." She gave a small, reassuring smile. "You are strong, Ethan, and you have already surprised me more than once. Just trust yourself." The guards led them to a vast, circular arena made of smooth black stone. The stands above were filled with Valari nobles and warriors, all watching with interest. At the highest seat sat Jaira's father, his golden eyes locked onto Ethan. A deep, resonant voice echoed across the arena. "Human, you claim to be worthy of my daughter. You claim to respect our ways. But respect must be earned." Ethan squared his shoulders. "I understand." The Valari leader gestured, and a large door at the side of the arena slid open. A towering figure stepped out, a Valari warrior clad in ornate battle armor. He was at least a foot taller than Ethan, with glowing silver tattoos marking his muscular arms. "This is Varric," the leader said, "one of our finest warriors. If you wish to stand among us, you must face him in combat." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat before, but this was different. The Valari were stronger, faster, and trained since birth for battle. Jaira stepped forward, concern in her eyes. "Father, this is not fair." Her father silenced her with a look. He must prove himself. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. "All right," he said, rolling his shoulders. "Let's do this." Varric smirked. "You are brave, human, but bravery alone will not save you." The moment the signal was given, Varric moved. He was fast, too fast. Ethan barely had time to react before the Valari's massive fist came swinging at him. He dodged to the side, but the sheer force of the strike sent a shockwave through the air. Ethan had no choice but to stay on the defensive. He ducked and weaved, avoiding Varric's powerful blows. But he couldn't just keep running. He had to find a way to fight back. Then he remembered something Jaira had told him about the Valari. They relied on power and speed, but they were not used to unpredictable movements. Ethan waited for the next attack. As Varric lunged forward, Ethan suddenly dropped low and rolled to the side. The unexpected move caused Varric to stumble slightly, his balance momentarily off. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan struck, aiming for the side of Varric's knee. The impact wasn't enough to bring the warrior down, but it made him grunt in frustration. The crowd murmured, They had expected Ethan to be crushed immediately, but he was still standing. Varric growled, "You fight like a shadow, human." Ethan smirked. "That's the idea." The battle continued, with Ethan using every bit of his agility and human adaptability to stay in the fight. Varric was stronger, but Ethan was smarter. He started recognizing small patterns in the warrior's attacks, tiny delays, slight hesitations, and he used them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan saw his opening. As Varric launched another powerful strike, Ethan sidestepped at the last second and delivered a precise blow to the warrior's ribs. It wasn't enough to injure him seriously, but it made Varric take a step back. That was all Ethan needed. He used the moment to strike again, forcing Varric onto the defensive. The Valara warrior narrowed his eyes, realizing that this human was more than just lucky. He was calculating every move. The crowd murmured louder now. The human had lasted far longer than expected. Finally, the Valara leader raised his hand. Enough. Varric stepped back, breathing heavily. He gave Ethan a long look before nodding. "You are not weak," he admitted. Ethan, gasping for breath, nodded back. "I'll take that as a compliment." Jaira let out a breath of relief, her eyes shining with pride. Her father stood, his expression unreadable. "You have shown skill, human, but skill alone does not define worth." Ethan straightened, meeting his gaze. "Then what does?" The leader stepped forward. "Honor, loyalty, strength of the mind as well as the body." He gestured toward another door. "You have passed the first test, but the real trial begins now." Ethan's stomach dropped. Jaira grabbed his arm. "Ethan, whatever happens next, remember, you are not alone." Ethan swallowed hard and stepped forward. Whatever the next challenge was, he was ready. Ethan followed the Valara guards through a long, dimly lit corridor. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft glow, casting strange shadows as he walked. His body ached from the fight with Varric, but he pushed the pain aside. He had won the first trial, but Jaira's father had made it clear there was more to come. Jaira walked beside him, her grip on his arm firm. "Ethan, the next trial will not test your strength. It will test something deeper." He glanced at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "The trial of the heart is different for everyone. It is designed to reveal your true nature." Ethan frowned. "Sounds like a personality test, but with higher stakes." Jaira sighed. "You could say that." They reached the end of the corridor, where a massive door stood. The guard stepped aside as the door slid open with a deep hum. Inside was a vast chamber, bathed in soft blue light. In the center stood Jaira's father, along with several Valara elders. "Step forward, human," the Valara leader commanded. Ethan took a deep breath and obeyed. The leader studied him with sharp golden eyes. "Strength alone does not define a warrior. Wisdom alone does not make one worthy. The heart is the true measure of a being." Ethan nodded. "And how do you plan to measure mine?" The leader gestured, and a pedestal rose from the floor. Atop it was a small, glowing orb. The energy inside swirled like a living storm. "This is the essence of truth," the leader said. "It will show us who you truly are. It will create a vision, one drawn from your mind and soul. Whatever you see, you must face it." Ethan exhaled. "All right, let's do this." He stepped forward and placed his hands on the orb. Instantly, the world around him vanished. Ethan found himself standing in a different place. He was no longer in the Valara chamber. Instead, he was on Earth, back in the city where he had grown up. The streets were familiar, the smell of rain and pavement filling the air. But something was wrong. The city was empty. No people, no sound, only silence. He turned, scanning the area. "Hello," he called out. No answer. Then, in the distance, he saw a figure. It was Jaira. She stood in the middle of the street, looking lost, her violet eyes filled with sorrow. But something was different. Her body was flickering, as if she wasn't fully there. Ethan ran toward her. Jaira. She turned to face him, her expression filled with pain. Ethan, you have to choose. He frowned. Choose what? Suddenly, another voice echoed through the empty streets. Come home, Ethan. He spun around and saw his parents standing there, their faces warm and familiar. His childhood home was behind them, its porch light glowing like a beacon. His heart pounded. What is this? He asked, looking back at Jaira. This is your truth, she whispered. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He understood now. The trial was forcing him to face the hardest question of all. Where did he belong? On Earth, with his people, or among the stars, with Jaira? His parents smiled at him, their hands reaching out. Come home, son. Ethan's chest tightened. He had dreamed of seeing them again, of walking through that front door like nothing had changed. But deep down, he knew it wasn't real. Jaira took a step closer. Ethan. He looked at her, at the way she shimmered, as if fading away. Then he knew his answer. He turned away from his past and faced Jaira. I already have a home. The world around him shattered. Ethan gasped as he was pulled back into reality. The chamber reappeared, and he stumbled slightly, his hands shaking. Jaira caught him before he fell. Ethan, are you all right? He blinked, trying to steady himself. Yeah, I'm fine. Her father stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You have made your choice. Ethan met his gaze. Yes. The leader studied him for a long moment. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he nodded. You passed the trial of the heart. Jaira let out a breath of relief, her grip on Ethan's arm tightening. Ethan looked at her father. What if I had chosen differently? The leader's golden eyes glowed. Then you would not be standing here. Ethan shivered at the implication. The Valara leader stepped back, his expression thoughtful. You have one final trial ahead. But for now, rest. Ethan exhaled, feeling the weight of what had just happened. He had made his choice. Now he had to prove it was the right one. Ethan sat in his chamber, his body still recovering from the last trial. The trial of the heart had shaken him more than he expected. He had seen his past, his family, and the life he had left behind. But he had made his choice. He chose Jaira. Now, only one trial remained. Jaira sat beside him, her fingers lightly tracing patterns on his hand. You did well, Ethan, she whispered. My father sees you differently now. Ethan chuckled, not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. She smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. The final trial. It is the most dangerous. Ethan turned to her. What is it? She hesitated. It is called the trial of devotion. He frowned. Sounds serious. She nodded. It is. The Valara do not believe in words alone. You have proven your strength, and you have shown your heart. But now, you must prove that you will stand by me, no matter what. Ethan took a deep breath. All right, let's do this. Jaira led him through the palace, past towering statues of Valara warriors. The halls were lined with glowing symbols, each one representing an ancient warrior who had passed these trials before. Ethan felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Finally, they'd reached an open courtyard. Dozens of Valara stood in a circle, their eyes glowing in the dim light. In the center, Jaira's father waited. You have come far, human, the Valara leader said. But there is one final test. Ethan squared his shoulders. I'm ready. The leader raised a hand, and the ground beneath Ethan trembled. A circular platform rose from the stone, glowing with strange energy. In this trial, you will prove your devotion, the leader continued. You will face an enemy of the Valara, one who has betrayed our people. Ethan's fists clenched. Who is it? The leader gestured, and the crowd parted. From the shadows, a tall figure stepped forward. Ethan's breath caught. It was Varric, the warrior who had challenged him before. the one who had lost. But something was different now. His armor was gone, and his hands were bound with glowing restraints. Jaira's eyes widened. "Father, what is this?" The leader's expression was cold. "Varric betrayed our clan. He broke our laws. And now Ethan must decide his fate." Ethan stiffened. "What?" The leader's gaze didn't waver. "If you wish to stand among us, you must prove that you will protect Jaira, even if it means delivering justice." Ethan's stomach turned. He wasn't a judge. He wasn't an executioner. This wasn't what he expected. Varric lifted his head. His eyes filled with anger, but also something else. Acceptance. Ethan glanced at Jaira. "This isn't right." Her voice was soft. "It is our way." Ethan exhaled. He could feel the eyes of the Valara watching him, waiting for his choice. If he refused, they might see him as weak. If he followed through, he would become something he didn't want to be. For a long moment, he stood there, his mind racing. Then he stepped forward. "I won't do it," he said firmly. The crowd murmured in surprise. Jaira's father narrowed his eyes. "You refuse the trial." Ethan shook his head. "I refuse to be someone I'm not. If justice must be served, let your people decide it. But I won't take a life just to prove I belong here." Silence filled the courtyard. The Valara watched, their expressions unreadable. Then, after a long pause, the leader spoke. "Interesting." He waved his hand, and the glowing restraints around Varric vanished. Ethan tensed, ready for another fight, but Varric didn't move. Instead, he lowered his head. "You have passed, human." Ethan blinked. "What?" The leader's gaze softened. "The trial of devotion is not about taking a life. It is about understanding the weight of your choices. You have chosen mercy, even when it would have been easier to follow our ways." Ethan let out a slow breath. "So, that was the test." The leader nodded. "And you have proven yourself worthy." Jaira let out a relieved sigh and squeezed Ethan's hand. He turned to her, seeing the pride in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. He smiled. "Yeah, I guess I did." The Valara leader stepped forward. "Ethan, you have earned your place among us. And more than that, you have earned the right to stand beside my daughter." The crowd erupted in cheers. Ethan let out a breath, his heart pounding. He had come so far, faced so many trials, and now he had finally won their respect. But as he looked at Jaira, he knew the real victory wasn't about proving himself to the Valara. It was about proving himself to her. And that, he realized, was the only trial that truly mattered. Ethan stood in the grand hall of the Valara palace, his heart still pounding from the final trial. The cheers of the Valara warriors still echoed in his ears. He had done it. He had passed every test, not by becoming someone else, but by staying true to himself. Jaira stood beside him, her golden eyes filled with admiration. "I knew you would make the right choice," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I wasn't sure myself for a moment." The Valara leader, Jaira's father, stepped forward. His once stern gaze was softer now. "Ethan, you have shown strength, heart, and wisdom. You have earned the right to stand beside my daughter." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The leader raised a hand, and the warriors around them struck their chests in a salute. Then, with a deep voice, he declared, "Let it be known that Ethan, the human, is now one of us." The hall erupted into cheers. Ethan let out a breath, finally letting himself relax. He had come to this world as an outsider, but now he was part of something bigger. As the celebration began, Jaira took his hand. "Come with me," she said, pulling him through the crowd. They walked through the glowing corridors of the palace until they reached a balcony overlooking the vast city below. The twin moons of Valara cast a soft light over the skyline. Ethan could see thousands of Valara gathered in the streets, celebrating with music and dance. Jaira turned to him. "How do you feel?" Ethan leaned on the balcony rail, looking at the city. like I just ran a marathon and forgot how to breathe. She laughed, the sound like a melody. You did something incredible, Ethan. Not just for me, but for my people. He met her gaze. I didn't do it for them. I did it for you. Her expression softened, and she stepped closer. And that is why you truly belong here. For a moment, they stood there, the night breeze carrying the sounds of celebration. Then, a deep voice interrupted them. Ahem. Ethan turned to see Jaira's father standing in the doorway. Even without his ceremonial robes, he looked powerful. I assume you two are discussing your future, the leader said. Ethan cleared his throat. Yes, we were just talking. Jaira's father studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good, because there is one final matter to discuss. Ethan tensed. Another test. The leader chuckled. No, just an important decision. Jaira's expression turned serious. He means your place here, Ethan. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Jaira's father walked forward, his hands behind his back. You have proven yourself to the Valara. You are one of us. But you are still human, and that means you have a choice. Ethan's chest tightened. He had come to Valara expecting to meet Jaira's family, maybe win their approval. He hadn't expected to become part of their world. Jaira took his hand. If you wish, you can return to Earth. No one will stop you. Ethan's mind raced. He thought of Earth, his home, his friends, everything he had left behind. The life of familiarity, comfort, and simplicity. But then he looked at Jaira, the woman who had risked everything to choose him, the woman who had believed in him when no one else had. He knew his answer. I'm staying, he said firmly. Jaira's eyes lit up. Ethan. Her father nodded approvingly. Then it is decided. From this moment on, you are Valara. Ethan grinned. Guess I'd better learn the language properly then. Jaira laughed, and for the first time, her father chuckled as well. The celebrations continued long into the night. Ethan danced with the Valara, tasted exotic foods, and listened to stories of ancient warriors. At one point, Jaira pulled him aside. Ethan, there is one more thing. He raised an eyebrow. More surprises. She smiled. This one is different. She led him to a sacred chamber, where an ancient symbol glowed on the floor. This is the bonding ritual, she explained. It is how Valara show their eternal commitment. Ethan's heart pounded. So, this is like a wedding. She nodded. In a way, but it is more than that. It is a bond of mind and soul. Ethan looked at her, his chest tightening with emotion. You really want this? She stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. I have wanted this from the moment I met you. Ethan smiled. Then let's do it. As they stood in the circle of light, the symbol on the floor glowed brighter. The energy wrapped around them, filling Ethan with warmth. In that moment, he knew this was where he belonged. Not on Earth, not among humans, but here with Jaira. Forever. The end.